Okay.
Okay, so we got everybody. This is Don Fish. Just be nice. Don't say anything too mean because there'll be a record of what anything you say will be recorded.
How come I can't hear him?
You're not hearing Don?
I hear you clear.
Okay, well, I will turn it over to Philena's moderating, so I will turn things over to Philena.
All right.
So there's nobody else who is.
Hold on, hold on.
You
Oh,
can be heard, Sue.
here I am.
Oh,
Oh,
There I am.
okay, okay. I was going to say I hear her, but I can't see her.
yeah. There you are. Where's Philena?
We had Philena. Did we lose her?
I'm sorry, I can't hear people. What am I doing wrong?
I don't know. Can you hear me now? You still can't see me.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you
Yes,
now.
I hear you.
How did you get
Okay.
your picture to appear?
Well, I'll just deal with oh yeah, my picture's gone now too. Jeez. Ah.
Unmute.
Okay.
But I can't. Hello? Can
Yes.
anybody hear me?
Yes.
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 She said she can't hear anybody.
She can't hear anybody. Oh,
Let me call the phone.
check your volume button. We should have got on a half an hour early, Don.
Okay, well, okay, Philena, are you having any audio or visual problems?
Yeah, Rita, I'm there. I changed my name from Howard to myself, but
Okay, well, if we can go ahead and start with Howard, I think we
yeah,
should.
so what do I do?
Who is this? Who's telling me this?
Oh, hold on. Let me try something.
I see
Okay,
she's talking.
Now I can hear people. Okay, thanks.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah,
All right, very
this
good.
technology does crazy things to me.
Yeah, it does sometimes. Yeah. And Philena, how you doing?
Philena, are you on? Okay, well, Philena seems to be on, but it's not responding. So, Howard, do you want to act as moderator and introduce yourself?
I can certainly introduce myself. Hi, I'm Howard Switzer of the Banking and Monetary Reform Committee of the Green Party. And we do a webinar. I think we did one last year and are happy to do another on why monetary reform is an important issue that people don't tend to talk about, don't seem to be conversant in, but we think it should be the focus of our political activism. I had a presentation that I was going to give, and Philena had a wonderful intro, but I don't have that at my fingertips, unfortunately, or I could read it to you. But I think I should go ahead and get started just with my slide picture so we aren't getting too far behind. And if Philena comes in, she can present later.
Well, I can still share it. It's just that I don't have video.
Okay. Ah, well, could you go ahead and do your intro?
Sure. I need do I need to be co-host or should I just add the link to the chat and it gets shared in this.
Oh, yeah, you could do that too.
I think I need to be, do I need to be co-host to share my,
No, your screen. You should be able to share your screen.
uh,
But if you don't have any video, that won't do much good. Huh.
okay. It's asking me,
Don't worry about the picture. And Philena, just go ahead and do your intro. Can you do it without pictures?
okay, let me see. I got, well,
Hey, there we are.
oh, okay, yeah, it looks like it up.
Oh, well,
Okay.
there it is.
Yeah, Zoom changed its settings on me. It's got a little added some more features.
Oh,
Okay. I don't know when that happened. It's definitely different than than the A&M. So,
Yeah, figure that out later and just start the presentation.
yep. Thank you, everybody. Hi, I'm Philena Farley, and welcome to our Black and Green uh, webinar for peace, justice, and prosperity. Tonight, we're going to be talking about National Skyscraper Day. Today is National Skyscraper Day, and we're going to be discussing how to dismantle those skyscrapers, these economic skyscrapers. So it's a little play on words, but it's a great topic since this is the day that it is done annually. So we can talk about uh, monetary reforms and what does that mean to the Green Party. So most people usually observe Skyscraper Day as a way to admire these, tall, extremely tall buildings that it resembles some type of engineering brilliance and city pride in the landscapes and everything. But the downside of these skyscrapers is it perpetuates urban inequality. It also has a social cost. It causes displacement, it causes rents to increases, it causes gentrification, and there's a corporate dominance in the city planning that comes with these massive towers. They also cause environmental damage. The natural habitat is usually destroyed by these skyscrapers and their pollutive um, expansions. So, what is greening the dollar exactly? Now, most people think of money as being green, but what would really greening our money mean to the Green Party? And that is what we're going to learn today. We're going to learn how these elite financial skyscrapers, meaning Wall Street and the big banks, dominate the economy. We're going to go over our policy plank on monetary reform, how to end private money, uh, private bank money creation, um, and restore money creation as a public utility under Congress so we can fund our Green New Deal for jobs, infrastructure, and community needs debt-free. So imagine this webinar is about a shaky economic skyscraper versus a solid green foundation. So tonight, first up, we're going to have Howard speak on what is the monetary reform in our policy. And then next will be Sue going over bank credit creation and how it funds the wars. And then Rita will discuss international banking. around the world and the corruption at the international level. And then Joe will go over our how Congress is supposed to issue the money. And then Richard will go over the policy roadmap and how we're going to continue the fight for monetary reforms. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A. All right, so first is Howard.
Okay, thank you, Philena. And stop sharing and I'll put my slides up and get started. So, elite economic skyscrapers. And of course, that's a euphemism for the powers that be that are standing in the way of peace, justice, and prosperity. As Henry Kissinger said. Pardon? Pardon?
It was an echo.
Echo.
Oh, it was an echo. Oh, dear. If you control the money, you control the entire world, as Henry Kissinger said. And of course, it's like that old saying that he who has the gold rules. And today it's he who creates the money rules. And a Princeton University study kind of showed this. And of course, we know ourselves from just observing that there's a revolving door of the corporations controlling government. But here's, they did a study for public policy and how, whether or not the public had any impact on US law, and they found that they didn't really. And it's because there was so much money coming in from industries to influence the US government. And here you can see the 6 industries. This is a 10-year study at the top here of those 6 industries and what their contributions were to their investment, basically, in government. But I want to point out that the finance industry owns all those other industries. And we'll show that a little bit later. Today, well, I'll show you that later. And then underneath here is a 5-year study that the same people did. And they found that the 200 most politically active companies invested $5.8 billion over 5 years from 2009 to 2014, this was. And what they got back in that period of time was 4.4 trillion in taxpayer subsidies and support. Now that's a 370% return on investment. So investing in government, those who can, in a big way, have a tremendous amount of return and influence on our government. And that's been going on for quite some time. And of course, it's corruption, and corruption is very profitable. The money lenders or the bankers from way back have been at this for a very long time. And of course, gold and precious metals became popular as money for a time, and they needed a safe place to store it. And so the money lenders had a bank to store their money in, and they would issue a certificate for that money that they had, a receipt basically for the deposit. And it got so where people were trading the receipts, not going back to the bank to get their gold, and the bankers noticed that, and so they started issuing more receipts than they had gold to back them. And that was the beginning of the fractional reserve banking system that we still have today. So we've got a monetary system that's hundreds of years old. They've messed with it a little bit, tweaked around the edges and everything, but you know, they were doing derivatives in the 1600s. And of course, it goes back before Jesus, because Plato and Aristotle talked about usury, the abuse of monetary authority for personal gain, as being unnatural and something that humans shouldn't do. And every religion banned it. In fact, they called it the sin of sins, and you know, attributed a lot of other sins to the sin of usury. going along here with the history and that I said I was going to share, the England had a revolution that the European bankers, they had got control of all the governments of Europe, and except England. England had its own monetary system, so they didn't have control of it. So they, uh, you know, propagandized and against the Catholic king, and had an invasion where they were able to depose the king. And in 4 years later, he gave uh, the Bank of England, which had funded that invasion, uh, the monetary power to create the nation's money and do away with the tally stick system, which had worked for 450 years in England and created prosperity there. As the pirate, one of the Bank of England investors, the pirate Peterson, said that the bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing. And of course, that's a good description of the system that we have today. The American colonies, of course, were going on then. They were having trouble, and a lot of poverty. It was very hard to make it in the New World, and even to a point where people were coming back to England from there until they figured out the money. And when they finally figured out money, they figured out that they could issue debt-free paper money to circulate, and it created prosperity. Well, Britain found out about all the prosperity and all the wealth that was going on in the new country, or in the colonies, and so they made those currencies illegal. And that plunged the colonies into a depression, and that's why we had the Revolutionary War. It was a revolt against the Bank of England and its oppressive monetary system. The viability of the colonists to get the power to issue their own money permanently out of the hands of the international bankers, which was headquartered by the Bank of England. And London, the city of London, is still a big economic interest here in the world. And that was the prime reason for the Revolutionary War. And it was funded by paper money that was issued by the Continental Congress, paper money that was debt-free, issued into to pay for the revolution. Problem was the British had ships in New York Harbor printing counterfeit Continentals as fast as they could to drive its value down. But that took 5.5 years, and by then we'd won the war. Militarily, we lost monetarily because in the post-war power struggle between a farmer and a banker, that's Jefferson and Hamilton representing the two factions that were going on there. Jefferson wanted to issue public money and have an agrarian society, and Hamilton wanted an industrial society, and he wanted to issue the money as debt, and the government would have to borrow the money. And that's what we have today because Hamilton won. And as Salvador Allende said 200 years later, we have won the revolution, but we have not won the power. And that's because any government that doesn't control money is controlled by those who do. Money is the governing factor, as that Princeton study showed us. And it remained a central political issue clear up to the Civil War. England's continued effort to break up the United States, centralizing power, caused the Civil War. And the bankers wouldn't lend money to Lincoln to defend the country. And so a friend of his suggested he used the Constitution and issue greenbacks, because the Constitution gave the power to Congress. So he convinced Congress, hey, let's issue greenbacks so we can defend the country. And they were debt-free money issued by the government as a permanently circulating asset, created prosperity by broadly distributing wealth, and they began eliminating debt from the economy. This was a description that Henry Carey, who was Lincoln's chief economic advisor, described the economy after the greenbacks were issued. Well, after, of course, that pissed off the bankers, they had him shot. And then for 40 years afterwards, the progressive and populist movements of the time were demanding more greenbacks be spent so that they could employ 4 million people and build roads and libraries, schools and utility plants, marketplaces, etc. And that's what Coxey's Army was all about in 1894. And that was the biggest protest that the Capitol had seen up to that time. And it all came to a head in the election of 1912 when Wilson was elected. But in that same year, the Pujo Committee investigated the money trust. The money trust was the bankers, and everybody was suspicious about what was going on with the bankers. And so they investigated, and what they discovered was the banks controlled every company and in every industry in the nation. With JP Morgan at the middle of it all. JP Morgan Company controlled all of these companies. And in fact, Rockefeller said at JP Morgan's funeral, said that, you know, he controlled us all and he wasn't even that rich. And it was true, he wasn't as rich as Rockefeller and Ford and some of the others, but he had the Rothschild family fortunes behind him. So, so he had the power. Money is power. And so Congress freaked out about that, and they figured, well, we'll have us a federal bank to regulate those banks. And of course, the big legislative sleight of hand, they ended up voting for a Federal Reserve that was privately controlled by the private banks, the very ones that supposedly were to be regulated, just like the revolving door is today in government, where the corporations that are supposed to be regulated run in the regulating agencies. As Frederick Soddy, he inspired monetary reform, and he said that the proper role of money is to be a public distributive mechanism for society. To allow it to become a source of revenue to private issuers is to create first a secret and illicit arm of the government, and last, a rival power strong enough to ultimately overthrow all other forms of government. And of course, he got the Nobel Prize in chemistry. There's even a moon crater named after Soddy. And most people have never heard of him, but he inspired the Chicago Plan, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And because at the 1929 crash happened, and that was investigated too by the Pecora Commission. And they determined that the Fed's fractional reserve system of private banks caused the crash and the Great Depression intentionally. And that's because when there is a crash, there's a tremendous amount of defaults. And there were thousands of banks, thousands of farms, homes, businesses that went under during that crash. And the people who had the money, big banks, they were able to buy it all up with pennies on the dollar. So it's very profitable, these crashes for the big banks, especially when the government will bail them out also. So a solution was brought forth, monetary reform again, which had been talked about for, you know, many, many decades. And it was supported by hundreds of economists world around. And so that was the Chicago Plan. It had these three elements to it. The power to create the money was removed from the private banks. The 12 Federal Reserve banks that exist now, they would be nationalized, not the individual banks, but just the federal banks. And then only the government would create the money. And that way it would be always for public purpose. Never be for speculation, because most of the money that banks lend goes to speculation. So Stevens Arlinga came to the Green Party back in 2009, I think it was, did a presentation on monetary reform. Some Greens picked it up and said, hey, this is important information, the history of the money and the science and what the solution to it would be, because Stephen pointed out, money is more a question of power than it is economics. So we put it in the Green Party platform in 2010, actually, and we passed it in 2008, but it went in 2010 because of the kerfuffle at the A&M over the platform. And then in 2011, and I don't know why I'm not seeing all my slide here, but oh, here it is. In 2011, Dennis Kucinich, that research that Stephen Zarlinga had done, and Stephen and he and Richard Cook, who's here with us tonight, helped put this legislation together. That was the National Emergency Employment Defense Act, and it had the same 3 reforms in it, plus a bunch of other stuff. And I've got a list of a bunch of other stuff here. Empowering Congress to create the money and regulate the value thereof, of course, that per Constitution, and provided a smooth, undisruptive transition. And that was real important to the writers of that bill. And it gives Congress the power over public policy to fulfill its constitutional mandate, and, which is the first sentence of the Constitution, right? And which is provide for the general welfare. And it also provided for the direct funding of transportation, energy, agriculture, water systems, sewage systems. There's a tremendous amount of money created that's going into people's pockets instead of into infrastructure and things for the people that the people need to create a prosperous society. It doesn't have to use a whole lot of material necessarily once it's in place. And if you're doing it right, not making it out of junky plastic and stuff like that, right? So, with Congress in control of public policy, if we could get a Congress that cared about public interest, of course, they could fix things. How am I doing on time? I'm not sure. Pardon? Pardon? Oh, anyway, I'll go on until somebody says something. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff. This one is important. Number 6, providing 25% of all new money annually to the states on a per capita basis so that they could determine what, their needs were, getting it closer to where the people are. And I'm in favor of it getting even closer than that. And with a good Congress, perhaps we could go in that direction. That's going to take some work, and that may take us American monetary revolution, and which is what the original revolution was all about. So it should be a good point to make to people that we could revive that revolution and complete the business of getting unhooked from this big private money sucking machine, and because it's a matter of law and that can be changed. And we could shift the paradigm from personal gain to public care, which I think is a psychological shift in the nation. So, we have this madness going on that's, more and more and more. And this would reverse that whole thing psychologically for people. That would begin changing society in bigger ways than just the physical aspects. And anyway, that's the BMRC has a newsletter. We talk about this stuff all the time. Come join us. And I guess I'm done for the moment. How did I do on time?
Did great, Howie. Thank you.
Great presentation, Howard.
All right.
Hey, Philena, are you keeping track of time of speakers?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we're just over about 10 minutes.
Okay. You were 10 minutes late in getting started, so we're doing good.
Yeah. So next
Okay.
is Sue.
Hi, I'll bring up my slides. There it is. Share. And then just help me. How do I oh, I know. I have to get rid of this thing at the top.
Oh, you got to click on your slideshow.
Yeah.
Click on that
Okay. I put it
slideshow
at the
and
bottom.
then hit start.
Slideshow. Start from first slide.
Yep.
Can you see it?
Yep, you got it.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk about, again, this power of the private banking system in our history. How, we don't see power, but we feel the effects of it in our everyday life and the quality of our lives. And I'm going to talk specifically about World War I and this money power of the private banks. And there's 3 parts to my presentation. The first 2 parts are during the U.S. period of neutrality from 1914 to the beginning of 1917. And then the last part, third part, is when we were at war with the Germans, alongside our allies. Okay. So here's U.S. is neutral, but supplies the European allies with war materials. Okay, in the first week of August 1914, the war began in Europe. On August 9th, and I remember that date because that's the date I was born, so I always remember it. The firm of J.P. Morgan and Company asked the Wilson administration if they objected to loans being made with the government of France and Britain. Those were the allies. Wilson thought about it and finally said yes to Morgan. He said, yes, you can make your loans. So in January of 1915, Morgan signed a commercial agency agreement with the British government by which it entered into a wide range of purchasing and contracting arrangements with American firms on behalf of the United Kingdom. Then the Morgan firm did the same thing with the French government in May of that same year, 1915. Okay. Morgan was the most powerful investment bank in the US, not a commercial bank. He was an investment bank. And he controlled powerful Wall Street banks, which were commercial banks. It's the commercial banks that when they make the loan creates what we all use as money. It's called bank credit. It's not the money created by our government. It's created by banks, it's credit, but we all use it as money. Today, 97% of all the money we all use in the United States was originally created as a loan from a commercial bank. So, controlling these Wall Street banks, Morgan thus had the means to finance on credit the war purchases in the US for the Allies. The Morgan firm, think of this as the power, decided which U.S. companies would manufacture the war supplies, set the prices that were going to be paid to these U.S. companies, set the prices that were going to be charged the British and French governments, and pay the U.S. ship operators to carry the war supplies to the European war. And there's some pictures. Let me get rid of this. Some pictures of what our economy, based on the power of commercial banking in this country, the destruction it caused. We were neutral, but look what, because of our production, run by our banking powers, was causing the death of people, the environment, and life over there. Okay. By the 1917 entrance into war by the US, $5 billion of war supplies and weapons have been exported from the US by the Morgan Syndicate. Here's what the Secretary of the Treasury of the US said at the end of 1916. The prosperity which set in so strongly during the fiscal year 1915 has grown in strength and volume and is now widely diffused throughout the United States. And that's because of the creation of what you see here. All these weapons being made and shipped to Europe. Still part two, but still while we're neutral. How the British and French governments paid for the war supplies from a neutral US. Okay, they paid three ways. The first way was gold. World War I had begun. Very soon, the belligerents effectively left the gold standard, and a flood of gold, more than $1 billion, started coming to the United States to pay for purchases by the Allies. Of course, it was being sent here to Morgan, who had the contract with them. On December 4th, 1916, the end of 1916, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury reported that the U.S. stock of gold was the largest in our history and in the history of the world. Remember, this is a world war. This is not just a regional war. This is the first world war. And of course, based on the power of this credit-making money system to fund it. You can't have a war without funding it with some money. And this was credit money. The second way the Allies paid was with US stocks and bonds. Britain and France confiscated about 1.4 billion of their citizens' US stocks and bonds, quote, transferred under compulsion to government control from their citizens. And Morgan would have been responsible for taking these US stocks and bonds and selling them on the US exchanges. And there's a picture of the US Stock Exchange back in 1908. And he would have made, of course, his hefty fees and commissions. So Morgan sold these to US citizens who took out bank loans to purchase them, creating credit, right? It's a loan from a commercial bank. And Morgan sold them also to commercial banks, and commercial banks also, when they buy securities, they're creating credit. Okay. The power of our credit-making banking system. The third way was Britain and France used European bonds, their own bonds. So they borrowed, Britain and France borrowed about 2.4 billion by selling their European bonds in the same US financial markets. Morgan would have been responsible for selling them also on the US exchanges and making hefty fees and commissions. So those were the ways during our neutrality that Morgan was being paid so that he could pay American manufacturers to create the weapons, the farms to grow the food, the manufacturers to create the soldiers' uniforms, whatever. Everything he was making and shipping it over to England and France. Beware when commercial banks make a loan with a borrower, they create credit in the borrower's bank account. It's what we all use as money today. Plus, when those same commercial banks buy securities, they create credit in the seller's bank account. During the period of US neutrality, the stock of money rose by 46% and wholesale prices by 65%. Remember, whenever a bank makes a loan and creates the money for the borrower, the credit in their account, that's new money. It's brand new money. The supply of money expands. So during our neutrality, the supply of money was expanding and expanding. And of course, with expansion of money, you get inflation. Wholesale prices rose. Okay, the last period is when we entered the war, 1917 through 1918. Okay, so on March 5th, 1917, the US ambassador to London, Walter H. Page, sent a confidential telegraph dispatch to President Wilson, which included the following. The Allies needed more credit or they will lose the war, he told Wilson. Morgan can't give more credit, he told Wilson. If the US declares war on Germany, the US government can give the Allies more credit, he told Wilson. And finally, he said this, the alternative to war for us, if we didn't go to war, was domestic collapse of the US. Beware. Although there were scattered attempts to leak this information, this telegraph that was so important, it was effectively suppressed by the bank-controlled media. Back then, they controlled the media. They do it today. And by the anti-German propaganda of the US government, which was immense, which is still going on today, the control of propaganda by our government. 1 month later, April 2nd, 1917, Wilson asked Congress for a declaration of war against Germany to, quote, make the world safe for democracy, end quote. He was elected in 1912 president under peace, a peace platform. And this is what we got. The newly created Federal Reserve System now was used to loan the European allies $9.4 billion. Most of this money went to American industries, of course, because we weren't decimated by the World War. We still had our country generating weapons. Most of this money went to American industry tied to Morgan, Kuhn Loeb, another very important investment bank, and Rockefeller, we all know that name, to pay for war supplies for the Allies, including us. And there's a picture of the US soldiers now involved, being killed, decimated over in Europe. From April 1917 to April 1919, 2 years, the US Treasury offered 5 war loans to the public called Liberty Bonds. The Liberty Bonds were bought by, well, the citizens who borrowed money from the commercial banks here in the US, creating bank credit, right? And they were also bought by commercial banks buying directly from the US Treasury, creating more bank credit here in the US. And you can see the level of propaganda that went into controlling the US population. A few more minutes. I'm almost finished. Marina Eccles, chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, said about World War I, while the public debt at the time the reserve system was created stood at less than $1 billion, when the war ended, the debt was $27 billion. And here's my last slide. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, said, all men by nature desire to know. Well, the Green Party is the only party that has a monetary reform, MR, platform plank. In addition, this reform has been proven historically to work. Number 2, MR creates a monetary system which incentivizes citizens to work for peace, justice, and prosperity. Number 3, MR is based on the Need Act. The power of commercial banks to create credit is removed totally. 4, MR will not cause immediately disastrous change in people's life. It's a gradual change. Number 5, all Green Party candidates and groups should include MR in their programs. Let us begin to plant a tree of knowledge. Thank you very much. How do I get out of here? Oh.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's so very important. Next, we're moving on to Rita in international banking. Rita, are you there? No, if she can.
She's muted.
You're still muted.
Yeah, I'm here. I need to share my screen. So anyway,
Okay,
I'm
gotcha.
sorry. Okay, is that visible for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Clicked on slideshow. That doesn't, I guess I'm having a problem with the.
On the upper left is from beginning. Click on from beginning. Upper left. Go over to the left. Now down a little. There you go.
Oh, wow, now it's too big.
Oh, it's good.
It's taking up my entire screen. I'm not sure how, okay, I guess I can change the slides with my cursor. I don't know how else to do it because it's covering my entire screen. Okay. Well, we saw in Sue's presentation here that banks played a role in bringing the United States into World War I and also profited greatly from that war. And in my presentation, I hope to show you how the banks create the absence of justice through creating immunities, which thereby enables them to acquire both power and wealth. So, the way to escape punishment for crimes is to make it legally impossible for prosecutors to obtain evidence with which the perpetrators of the crimes can be prosecuted and punished. So let's start by defining justice and what justice is supposed to be. Justice is fairness, moral rightness, a scheme or system in which every person receives their due from the system, including their rights, both natural and legal. And criminal justice includes investigating crimes, prosecuting offenders, and implementing punishments. There can be no real peace and harmony in society when there is no justice in the prevention of crimes that harm most of the people, either physically or financially. One of the levers used to diminish prosecution of criminal acts is called immunity. And I'll talk more about immunity after I introduce you to the Bank for International Settlements. Oops. I don't know where that went the wrong way. Oh, there. All right. In keeping with today's theme in celebrating National Skyscraper Day, I am presenting this building that one author has described as an ivory tower. Wikipedia describes ivory tower as a state of privileged seclusion from the practicalities of real life. I will be explaining the privileged seclusion that is enjoyed by this bank and how it affects all of us. And this is the Bank for International Settlements located in Basel, Switzerland, and is owned by 63 central banks of various countries and the Federal Reserve System of the U.S. Discussions about having an international bank began about 1920, not long after the close of the First World War. There was a need for an international bank to handle the payment of reparations after World War I. And these discussions continued for several more years, and then finally in 1930, the Bank for International Settlements was established. The main functions of this bank are providing a forum for dialogue, facilitating financial transactions, and setting international regulatory standards. The Bank for International Settlements is granted sovereign immunities with broad protections, some of which also extend to the owner banks and a myriad of other organizations and insurance companies. These broad immunities create an absence or total void of justice in many cases, including those involving bankers. And immunities can be created through legislation, treaties, international agreements, by extension of immunities to persons or entities that are parties to the international transactions, by non-disclosure agreements, and special exemptions granted to international and nonprofit organizations, and through judicial interpretation of international laws. So there are many ways by which these immunities can be granted. So what do the immunities include? Well, for the Bank of International Settlements, the officials and the staff enjoy immunity from legal process in respect to acts performed in their official capacity, meaning they cannot be sued or arrested. The Bank for International Settlements property and assets, including deposits and other funds entrusted to it, are immune from search, requisition, confiscation, expropriation, seizure, or other forms of interference by executive, judicial, or legislative action. And this also includes their archives. And it's also directly exempt from indirect taxes, rates, and duties, including customs duties on imported or exported goods used for official purposes. So what happens when we grant all these immunities to bankers and their underlings and so on and so forth? The economic crash in 2008 is an example of the effect of immunities on the justice system. You may have noticed that there were no bankers that went to prison that we heard about after this particular crash. There are trillions of dollars that run through the bank on a regular basis in exchange, as exchanges are made between countries, and they are facilitated by the Bank for International Settlements. Those transactions are immune from any kind of investigation or oversight by enforcement agencies. This lack of oversight allows criminal behavior in the form of money laundering to occur with no prosecutions for the crime. Is there justice when criminal acts go unpunished? I don't think so. So if we look back on the crash that occurred in 2008, we can directly blame the lack of oversight in these transactions for the illegal and harmful investments that were invented and traded by the banks that caused the crash. And the banks did not suffer. They were bailed out. In the meantime, during the Great Recession that followed, it's estimated that around 6 million American households lost their homes to foreclosure by 2009. By some measures, over 30 million individuals lost their jobs, and the rate of long-term unemployment doubled its historic high. The decision of the banks to use their own registration system called the Mortgage electronic registration system caused a problem with the registering the ownership of mortgages with the local county registers of deeds. It caused also a drop in income for the counties for the fees that would be paid for registering these deeds or these mortgages with the counties. It amounted to several $billions in lost revenue for the larger states. And also, it declined in the ability to adequately determine the ownership of mortgages on real estate. So, anyway, and lastly, I'm going to, we're going to look at this graph here. This graph is from an article that was written by Corey Lynn. And the name of the article is The Control Network, Laundering Money with Total Immunity. And I will be putting a link to that article in the chat here after I finish. And anyway, Corey Lynn is someone who works with Catherine Austin Fitts, if you are familiar with her at all. And she's not a well-known auditor, but she works almost exclusively with writing articles about the banks and the monetary problems. So anyway, this pyramid breaks down the organizations that benefit from immunities with, anyway, we have the Bank for International Settlements at the top. They are the source of many of the immunities because the immunities that they have are passed down to their owner banks and also, which include the Federal Reserve, and also their insurance companies and cover all of their payment systems. So if they do not have to disclose to anyone what is going on with respect to those particular their functions with their payment systems and so forth. And also, many of the immunities are extended to international organizations by treaties and in other ways besides the treaties. And they include things like Gavi. Gavi is the let's see, the Vaccine Alliance that is funded by Bill Gates, the Bill Gates Foundation, and others. And also, Big Pharma has immunities, and CERN, or CERN, which is a European organization that works on nuclear what do I want to say? Nuclear organization. So nuclear research. Yes, thank you. So those closer to the top have the most benefits, of course, while those at the bottom are less beneficial than the top ones. So there are also thousands of non-governmental organizations and corporations that work with and through these other organizations and banks that have some extended immunities and also have often non-disclosure agreements that they're subjected to. And down at the bottom of this pyramid is the rest of us, okay? Yeah, we are slaves down here. We don't have any immunities. So, you know, we're not as fortunate as all these other organizations and folks. The citizens are paying into a systemically corrupt system, and state legislators need to enforce the Constitution, create independence from the Federal Reserve and central banks, and protect state sovereignty. So one of the ways to protect against all of this is to have state sovereignty. Anyway, if we were to have the NEED Act passed, it would do a lot to prevent some of the abuses of this system, mainly because it would prevent these banks from creating money or as debt the way they have been doing for the last 100+ years, and would be a more fair system for everyone. So, and as Martin Luther King Jr. said, there is no peace without justice, and there is no justice without peace. So anyway, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Rita. That was great.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joe. It's going to congressional role.
Let's see. Okay. So, let's see. No, I just lost my, sorry, I just lost my camera. Okay. No, I lost, what's going on? Okay. So everybody can hear me right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm not going to ask for screen sharing because I'm only going to be reading from my notes that I have in front of me. And I want to move through some of the great comments that have been made already to the point of the government issuing the money and how the government can issue the money. And it's actually been pretty much discussed with regard to the NEED Act, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the great and only blueprint that we have for how public monies would and should get administered in a public money system. Excuse me. But first, I wanted to go to the big picture. How come okay, sorry. So I want to go to the big picture, which is the fact that right now today we are at a point of being intersecting among the vast powers of finance and civil society. And when I say that, what I mean is this. Back up and say one thing, because my dad, one of the things that he told me, which he told me many things, and you should know that my learning of money was through my dad, and he told me many things about money that I was absolutely for sure were not true. And the first would have been that thing about they don't teach the monetary system in any college or university in this country, and he said, and maybe anywhere in the world. And I was sure that wasn't true until I found out it was. But he told me this other anecdote that stuck with me as if it were the absolute truth. When he said, well, because he knew that I was studying Marx a little bit on the side, you know. And he said, from what he said, he had read that Marx made the statement that revolution was 90% opportunity. and I have tried to, locate the source of that, and I haven't. But I'm going to say this. To me, it must be a truism, because how do revolutions happen? Revolutions happen when the stars align, when the institutions and the systems achieve such great control and power over the citizens that they can no longer stand for it. In our case, this is what I want to say about, we have that opportunity right now because our institutions have taken the monetary systems, I'm going to say of the world, I'm going to take of our monetary system, because it's based on debt and not money, and because it is outside of the control of the people of the United States and of our control of the Congress of the United States, which is the only body that could straighten it out. We have the situation now where there's there's like really no question about it, but that there's too much unpayable debt in the world, that the World Economic Forum is standing prepared to take that debt and use that debt to achieve control over the entire population, and they want to do that. And we have these skyscrapers out there aiding and abetting that attempt to transfer the I'm going to say the dearth of power from the debt that exists to the political power, because the banks control the I'm going to say our politics, our political system. So in this country, we have that kind of a perfect storm, to me. Okay, absolutely. And I don't just mean just in this country, because there isn't any country in the world that's maybe as bad as us, because you know, we kind of wasted the fact of being the world's reserve currency to just continue to issue debt until we have $37 trillion in debt. Because why? Because we don't create the money. So it's as simple as that to me, you know. So that is what I call, you know, the setting of the table here. We're in need of a revolution, and the opportunity for a revolution, of monetary revolution, of liberation for society, is presenting itself. And we have the solution. And I mean that. I'm glad to hear it described as the Green Party of the United States. I mean, maybe it's only been said in this light, but the Green Party of the United States is the only political party in the United States that has a plank to reform the creation and issuance and the regulation and the nature of the monetary system. Okay, that those powers are laid out in those changes that we want to make. But I'm going to say that, as far as I know, we're the only political party in the world that has that. I want to say that, okay, because the other thing that makes the United States of America unique is the fact that we grew up on the basis of monetary experimentation. Okay, the colonies were here. They're like, oh, we're a new nation on earth. We need to set up a means for being able to exchange goods and services among all each other. So they set up the colonial monetary system, the colonial, however you wanted to describe it, script, whatever, systems. And they issued the money in the correct amounts and manner, importantly, like how did they issue it? What did they do with it? So that when the British came along and said, we don't want you guys to have that power anymore, you know, your colonies, and, you know, we don't want you to have that power anymore, that we're the ones that had the revolution. You know, we're the only country, as far as I know, ever in the world that rose up to have a revolution as a result of stolen monetary power by the British. So we have already the essence of the model for how to achieve economic prosperity. And that is to say, restore the power of the government to issue the money, to restore the. So we fought a revolution. As Howard said, it lasted only about until Hamilton got his first banks established, private, almost exclusively private, actually exclusively private. And then we've been struggling back and forth. We got the greenbacks. We got greenbacks. We got government issued money without debt. We got to have it paying for the expenses of the government. And it's the nature of government money to remain permanently in circulation. And that to me is like, it can't be overstated, because in a debt-based money system, money is created and only lasts as long as the loan. But in a debt-free money system, money is created, issued into circulation by the government, and remains in circulation forever. So the whole concept of having debt-based money that has to renew debt every time the loan is paid off, therefore leading to compounding interest having to be paid, leading to much greater increases in debt. And those types of parameters on political parameters on society is what's caused the lack of parity, the great disparity of incomes and wealth. And we're the ones, this is what I'm trying to get back to. The Green Party's platform is the only platform that can really give it what it needs and so let's take that now to what the NEED Act does in terms of this importance. Remember, it ends debt-based money. There's not going to be any debt associated with the creation of money. The government is going to issue the money into circulation, so it becomes money when it's paid into circulation by the government. And the authority for the government to issue it into circulation comes from the monetary authority. Okay? So it's not the banks determining the capital development of the economy. It's the Congress determining the budget of the government and financing it through combination of taxes and not debt, but equity, if you will. Okay, government creating and issuing money takes care of so many of the big problems that are associated with money and banking today, and so we have the ability to do that. We have I call it skyscraper avoidance potential from advancing what we need, which is public money, the administration of public money, ending the debts associated with the private issuance of money, private debt issuance of money. It's so egregious when you think about it for just a minute. It's so egregious that we have a system where the banks get to create all the money by issuing debt or by issuing debt contracts, the existence of debt, and then that debt never goes away. The way we do it in this country, the way it's done, as soon as that debt is repaid, we need another debt to replace it, or the money supply goes down, and then you can't have, I'm going to say prosperity, or you can't really have stability in the economy. So that's their thing. So what does that mean? Remember when Sue was going through the growth of the debt during the First World War? That means we're still paying for that. That means we're still paying for that. We're paying interest for the money from the First World War, from the money from before the first, all money that was in the money that became the money supply, that had to remain the money supply, in fact, to grow the money supply, which is more debt. All of that money is getting compound interest over the years. They hide it because the mechanisms are not out in the open, because there is no public monetary authority that would be studying and looking at that and ramifications of that, so that you would avoid that. We don't have that, but we do have the ability to have the Congress enact the NEED Act, greatest thing that's come down the pike as far as I'm concerned since I've been a monetary reformer. And if we did that, then the institutions, not the skyscrapers, because this is capitalism. I don't want to say socialism, but it's people in control. When the people are in control, you don't have skyscrapers. You rather have communities. And so replacing those skyscrapers with community control and management of the money supply is the most important thing that we can possibly do to achieve prosperity. So it says peace, parity, and power to the people. That's my view of it. So that's kind of all that I want to say. I'm probably over time, and I'm sorry if I am, but the fact is that the institutions that are out there, or the skyscrapers that are out there, are the institutions that are out there. They have all grown up since there has been the historic, if you will, private central banking model for empowering those who create the money and then making it a power of the banks to create the money. That's the world that we've developed and the world that we live in. It's not a great world. And the fact that we're here today, when I mean by that, I mean where the whole system is bankrupt. The whole banking and monetary, global banking and monetary system is bankrupt. And when I say that, I'm using the words of Dr. William White, who's a central banker, former retired central banker from Canada, and who was managing the BIS's Office of Monetary and Economic Affairs for a long time. He says insolvency is the word. Insolvency is the word. So they keep kicking the can down the road as long as they can. But they're going to come back in now with what? Central bank digital currency. They're going to try to come back in with something that's not money because the money thing's not going to work. So they're going to try to come back with central bank. But I don't think the central bank digital currency is going to be the threat. It's going to be rather crypto in nature. It's going to be rather totally fake money. How totally fake? Crypto, the word means hidden, you know? So we have something in the monetary system. They've hidden it already from us since the day that we had the country. And now they want to have something not only hidden, but made opaque to the degree where it wouldn't really matter. So that's the situation that we have. We have to be able to act to avoid the cryptocurrency phenomenon, if you will, and central bank digital currency. Like I said, I don't think it's going to happen because they have not mastered the central bank digital currency model. The Bank for International Settlements, if you don't mind me saying so, they wasted the power that they would have had to be able to design a central bank digital currency, but they left it to the data Nazis, I'm going to call them. Okay, they left it to them. Say, you guys figure it out. It's just the payment system that we're going to really have to do. But it's not that. It's not that. And we can't let them take over the rest of our lives through either crypto or central bank digital currency. We have to take it back for ourselves. And then following the directives, the powers that are enabled to the Congress and the NEED Act, we can do it. So we have to continue to focus on that. I don't know what else is on there that could possibly be more important to anybody. I really don't. But to me, that's the story that we need to do to knock down these skyscrapers and replace them with communities. Over.
Thank you so much, Joe. Okay, and I think last but not least, we have Richard. He's going to go over the policy roadmap and the calls to action, and then we'll have a quick Q&A. And that would be it. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Can you just put my picture up on the screen? I'm going to rework from notes like Joe did. I don't have a slideshow. Let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is Richard Cook. I use the middle initial C, Richard C. Cook, in my writings. And I've been working in this field for quite a while. I began to really delve into monetary systems when I worked in the Jimmy Carter White House. And you know how long ago that was. After some ups and downs within the government, including being a whistleblower at the time of the Challenger disaster, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but I landed in the U.S. Treasury Department, and I spent 21 years in the U.S. Treasury Department as a policy analyst, culminating in teaching the history of the U.S. monetary system. So I learned quite a lot about this during that time. And as soon as I retired from the government in 2007, I published a book on the Challenger disaster called Challenger Revealed. But then I immediately turned to my experience with Treasury. And I wrote another book called We Hold These Truths, The Hope of Monetary Reform. Because by that time, I was becoming acquainted with Steve Zarlinga. And I got to know Steve really well. We spent quite a bit of time together at his conferences. He would come to Washington and we would meet together. And one day, I was so impressed with Steve's work that I said, well, the guy I think ought to know about this is Dennis Kucinich. So I went up to Capitol Hill. I walked into Kucinich's offices and I said, is Mr. Kucinich here? There are some things he needs to know about. And that was the beginning of a long relationship among Steve, Dennis, and myself. And Steve and I literally spent hours briefing Dennis on the history of the US monetary system. And the whole upshot of it was that the debt-based monetary system is a catastrophe for the United States. And I think our speakers today have really made that very clear. Howard has gone through the history of the US monetary system, going back to the earliest days. Joe just gave a great talk on how the Green Party has the opportunity with the NEED Act that Dennis put on the books of Congress to really bring about a major change in the worldwide economic system, which is so important to do. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but there is a body of information that I think folks really need to know about that hasn't really come out thus far in the debate on monetary reform. And so I'm going to go over some of that information with you today very briefly before I turn it over to questions and answers. We don't really understand economics. And Joe made it pretty clear that economics in its true sense is never really taught. And I want to point out that the world of science and technology so transformed the productive processes of the world that the monetary system, based upon the accumulation of gold in the medieval model of the gold collectors and issuing paper certificates based on that, is so out of date that trying to apply that to the modern world and modern industry and modern science has been truly catastrophic. So let me just read some notes. From the late 18th century onwards, the world began to be transformed by science and technology. This started with the discovery and harnessing of electricity, followed by the running of machinery with steam power, and later fossil fuels, leading to the cybernetic revolution and the automation of work processes, all of which have changed the world permanently, to the point today where we have the specter of AI being prophesied to put half the workforce out of a job. So if half the workforce can't work, can't earn a living, how are they going to have the money to live? How are they going to have the money to purchase what industry is now capable of producing? The contradictions are so glaring and the neglect is so horrendous of these forces, of these elements, that we're facing a gigantic world catastrophe, which we are beginning to see today. Now, by the early 19th century, capital, that is the accumulation of monetary resources for investment into productivity improvements, began to assert itself as superior to human labor in the creation of goods and services. So competition began between capital and labor for the control of industry. Capital argued that as owners of the newly founded factories during the Industrial Revolution, they alone had the right to determine how profits should be accumulated and spent. Labor argued that as we were the ones actually doing the work, we, the people doing the work, should at least have a fair share. Of course, in its extreme form, this led to the advocacy of socialism and similar ideologies as the only rational solution, where the needs of the community at large had priority, with public ownership of the means of production the solution. And so this war between labor and capital has been going on throughout the entire industrial period. And that's the background to the monetary crisis that nobody really and truly understands. There was an underlying issue through all of this that very few people recognized. And this is what I began to study when I was in the Carter White House by reading about the monetary debates that swirl around after World War I, when everybody realized what a catastrophe that was. This was the fact, and this was actually noticed by perceptive witnesses in America in the 1830s, that in any industrial process, there is a persistent gap between a nation's productive capacity, which of course we designate today as GDP, and the national income paid out in wages, salaries, and dividends. The existence of such a gap is inevitable due to the need to recycle a portion of earnings from production into the development of new processes, added to the inevitable tendency on the part of individuals to pull cash out of circulation as savings or as investment in non-productive uses like mansions, big houses, fancy cars, and extravagant lifestyles. So the production did not yield the income to purchase it. The genius of Henry Ford solved this problem by his decision to pay his workers enough to buy the cars that they made. But this stroke of genius by Ford has been neglected throughout the years to the point today where the productivity of labor is so high and their payment is so low that we're creating an underclass that approximates up to half of the entire labor force, falling deeper and deeper into poverty. So the question began, and it was addressed by the political class, how to fill the gap between production and income. Let me go through the major methods that society chose to do that, and I think you'll see where I'm going with this. Number one, allow the GDP income gap to be filled by lending from banks, which create money out of thin air with the fractional reserve method, and it's this lending at compounded rates of interest that turns into the usury that is the mechanism that has created what Andrew Jackson called a monetary aristocracy. And it becomes then a gigantic overhead on industrial production. That's why it has been estimated, and this again goes back to something Joe said, that we're still carrying the compound interest of World War I. The American Monetary Institute, when I was working with them, with Steve and others, estimated that up to 50% of the prices of all consumer commodities are accumulated interest from bank lending and from the accumulated compound interest from that lending. So just imagine everything you own, everything you buy, everything you see in a store, 50% of that price is made up of interest that goes into the hands of the monetary aristocracy. This is a fact. Debt is a universal plague. Even the so-called Keynesian revolution uses the privately owned central banking system to implement government borrowing to where the federal government debt is now over $37 trillion. $37 trillion and growing every day. This leads to constant competition, imperialism, wars of conquest, trade wars, which we're seeing unfold in the United States today, which is destroying the United States economy through Trump tariff terrorism. This goes back to the collapse of the economic system due to the contradiction between production and income that we've been talking about. Another method of getting rid of the gap between production and purchasing power has also been mentioned tonight: inflation. Inflation is a weapon that is used by debtors to pay down their debt with inflated or devalued dollars. If anybody tells you that the government is going to fight inflation, and I say this coming out of a career in government finance, is lying to you through the teeth. The government's interest is promoting as much inflation as possible, because every inflated dollar means more tax revenue. Why do they need more tax revenue? They need more tax revenue to pay down the national debt. You can see it in the growth in property taxes. Everybody who owns a house knows that their assessment is going up solely because of inflation. I went to the mayor of my town and I said, you guys love inflation because you're reaping these windfalls. You're building all these new projects. You're hiring all these new people. You're giving yourself pay increases not because you're producing anything more, but because of the inflation of housing prices. He said, oh, no, we don't love inflation. We're in the same boat as you are, but it's a lie. The government loves inflation and it promotes inflation. And if you look at the purchasing power of a dollar, compare that to what it was before World War I, and see what that dollar is worth today, and you'll see what a role inflation has played in destroying the modern economy and in destroying the livelihood of people. Another manifestation of this is you keep a large portion of your domestic population in poverty while weakening them through addiction, distraction, or fear to prevent mass revolution. And eventually, you even start depopulating the earth, which is being done. And I'm not going to get into too much trouble here by talking about what is going on with the whole vaccination controversy, but I think people who have been following this knows what I mean. Then you can engage in out of control monopoly corporatism, which is another attempt to bridge the gap between production and purchasing power, because then you start cutting corners, you break laws, you destroy the environment, you exploit workers. You degrade every human value to make sure that your stockholders and your hedge fund owners stay ahead of the collapse in economic purchasing power, to make money as fast as technology and your own personal greed will allow. And then finally, here's another factor that very few people truly understand. Have you heard about velocity of money? A velocity of money means that if you have a dollar, you can go down and buy a dollar's worth of a product. But if the next person who gets that dollar spends it in the next 10 minutes, its purchasing power will increase. And so everything is done to increase the rate by which money is spent as long as it's still in circulation before it's paid back to the bank in the loans that you just took out. So you try to create more economic activity through rapid turnover of cash and credit. And this leads to one really important phenomenon, which is the tremendous growth in the concentration of the population in urban centers. Because in an urban center, the velocity of money increases faster and faster and faster because people are so close together. They spend their money so rapidly that it can support an inadequate amount of money can support much more economic activity than in a society where people are spread out among small towns and rural areas. And this is one major reason for the total destruction of America's rural society, was that you got to pack people together in cities to create greater velocity of money. And it creates a frenetic consumer economy where buying huge quantities of useless products becomes a desirable way of life. The alternative to all of this is that the government can issue the money to fill the gap, which is what going back in history, the Andrew Jackson and Lincoln administrations as examples tried to do. Unfortunately, the political power of the monetary aristocracy has been such that these measures are opposed and eventually squashed altogether. And so been this constant warfare throughout American history between the banking system, which tries to bridge the gap between production and purchasing power with debt and loans, and out of control monopoly corporatism, and those handful of people who truly know and understand what monetary reform could be. And those people who do understand that are always returning to one basic concept: government creation of money, government control of money, and government spending money into circulation. Now, the fact is that uh, uh, the purchasing power of ordinary citizens is so tremendously compromised that we've got to have one particular feature of the Kucinich Need Act that I insisted be put in there, and that's the citizens' dividend. We currently estimate that there's a gap of about $10,000 a year that should be paid out to every citizen as their dividend in our producing economy to allow the economy to function properly and to allow what is capable of being produced to be purchased at a level of full employment for the entire economy. And so that's a very important feature of the NEED Act. Okay, so I've gone on, and I think you've got enough information from all of us to be able to put all of this together. Let me just mention one other thing, because I'm supposed to say something about how we are supposed to take action to deal with these things. And that is to support the Green Party as we move forward into the 2026 and 2028 election cycles. Let me give you my place you can read my articles. I put out what is called a Substack. It's a blog, and I know you're familiar with that because there are probably at least 20,000 Substacks out there. The one I publish is called Three Sages, and I do this in conjunction with two other older guys like me who cover different fields. But you can go on to Three Sages, and you can read the article I posted today, which is a call for a new American revolution. And specifically a new American monetary revolution. And that contains the material that I've just been reading to you. And it also contains my announcement that I am planning to run for the nomination for the Maryland office of governor in 2026 for the Green Party. And I've begun to contact people at the state level here in Maryland. I've spoken to Howard about it. I've spoken to other people at the national level about it. And I do encourage you to take a look at running yourself for office under the Green Party, because I'm quite sure that a lot of the people who are here today listening to the podcast could make an impact by speaking out in your community, either through local office, through congressional runs for the House of Representatives or the Senate. Because if there were, say, 50 of us who all at the same time in 2026 began to call for a new American monetary revolution, I think the public would start listening to us. And so I would certainly encourage you to do that. So thank you for having me. And I'll be happy to join in the question and answer period if people want to pursue these things further. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So let me share my screen one more time. No, wait. Did it work? Okay. There we go. All right. So the end of is how do we advocate for greening the dollar at the local and national levels? So I'm going to do like a little tongue-in-cheek to Joe talking about the star alignments, because not only is it national Skyscraper Day. But just today, there was this press conference for the Epstein's files, right? And if you didn't see it, you might want to look at it. I'm thinking about splicing it with some of the video content we just did today because remember Massey, he hosted the free and equal debates with all the other candidates that were running for president last year. So we know like Massey's friendly with democracy and a lot of the some, but Martin Taylor Greene kind of surprised me, and but I'm glad to see that they were exposing in their press conference today that this has nothing to do with like the whole Epstein, like the officials don't want to be caught with the you know human trafficking. No, they're not the ones that are stopping it. They were saying that it was the banks. They literally said it was the banks in the press conference today, you guys. They said the banks were the reason because they were funding and doing everything. They knew about all of it. And they want that released. That's what's the holdup is the banks. Very
Yes,
control.
indeed. As Lord Acton said, that the sweep of history shows us that eventually it's going to be the people versus the banks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it looks like we have some questions. Can we get on to those and get on with this discussion?
Yep.
Brian Lambie, you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, hi, it's Lamble. It's
Lamble, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm actually in
eyes are
the Missouri Green Party. So thanks to Don and Barbara for putting this on. And I see a couple Kansas, I'm on the west side in Kansas City, and I see a couple of my fellow KC chapter members. So that's good to see. Okay, I have one question, but I have a couple comments ahead of time. Actually, I guess I have two questions. With respect to the BIS, I want to make an extra point that the chart that was presented of the BIS as a pyramid is terrific, particularly when you consider that the BIS is the international clearinghouse for all transactions. And what that means is that the BIS more or less regulates the risk of transactions internationally. And as a result, it sets all manner of policy. And apropos, the reason that's important, particularly with respect to the immunity that was discussed, is that the BIS is kind of like the Federal Reserve on the international stage. It's owned by international banks. And so if the international banks don't want to be prosecuted, they can do whatever they want, laundered not only legally, but also um, culturally, so to speak, or normatively through the BIS and set all manner of margin calls, margin prices, transaction fees. They can move money to create or eliminate solvency in any kind of bank in any kind of location, and it's all done in the monetary aristocracy on the international stage. So I love that the BIS was a component of this presentation. And I love the presentation all around. This is exactly what I think we need to be talking about in the Green Party, full stop. So that was one thing, the BIS. Another thing is, I don't know why we're not using the language of the day when we talk about the fact that the United States is a monetary sovereignty in the sense in almost the global sovereignty in with respect to the dollar being more or less still the underpinning of international currency, the standard. We need to be using the phrase modern monetary theory. I hope that everybody's heard that phrase and understands the simplistic but profound meaning of modern monetary theory, which is essentially that any monetary sovereign state that has a functioning monetary system can never go bankrupt in its own currency because it prints its own currency. So any debt that it accrues can be paid off by creating its own currency. The danger of that, of course, is inflation. All right. But it's important because it puts the danger of debt in its place. Debt is a danger on the international stage in particular because it creates leverage internationally that we can't manage very well. But it, more importantly, domestically, modern monetary theory removes on the federal level, at least, the idea of scarcity in money and scarcity in resources. And it's a way to cut off at the knees any idea that we have to pay for anything, which we all know that the pay for idea is only ever utilized as a cudgel against social services. It's never against military spending, of course. It's never against to protect solvency of any kind of, domestic banking system or Wall Street or anything like that. So I think it's really, really important to focus on the idea of modern monetary theory. One ancillary point to that is that um, we have been conditioned in the United States over almost, close to a century and a half to believe that the economy and the banking system is this remarkably complex, organizational dynamic system that we could never truly understand. And that's not accurate. It's just not that accurate. I mean, economic activity internationally is complex, sure, and domestically it can be complex, but it's not any more, it doesn't have to be any more complex than the idea of government created money versus bank/debt created money. And people get that. If we just focus on that dichotomy between free money, quote unquote, government created money that is created without debt, without the original sin of debt, people will respond to that. We don't need to, I mean, the historical lesson is terrific, but if we just start with that arrow to the heart that like the government creates money, the monetary creation function belongs in the people's chamber. The people need to reclaim that via the people's chamber, the Congress. People will respond to that. We don't need to indulge in this idea that the economic system is wildly complex and that people won't get it. Let's just focus on the simple part. Okay. With respect to modern monetary theory, one of the founders, so to speak, of the intellectual movement towards modern monetary theory is a Green. His name's Warren Mosler. And I guess he lives in the U.S. Virgin Islands, or he has a home in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And
Very aware of Warren. We know him very well.
okay. So my
And
question
we've
here is
had
why,
conversations with him. And in fact, we're going to have a forum where monetary reform and modern monetary theory are going to discuss the differences and um, some of the claims that are made by modern monetary theory
awesome. That's great.
as compared to monetary reform.
Great. I'm very glad to
And
hear
that'll
that.
be on October 11th.
Awesome. Very excited to hear that. My question was going to be whether or not Warren was invited to speak, but now that I know that there's going to be a special specific seminar and
Right.
discussion
Yeah.
about that.
We didn't want to get into MMT because there are definitely some differences.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. But I'm really reassured to hear you say that. Okay, and then the final question I had is I would love a recommendation in the tome that is Stephen Zarlinga's A History of Money of what chapter to start with, because I have to confess, I've had that book for over a year and it is so thick and so expansive historically that I don't want to try to read from page one to page, you know, 750. So if anybody has a recommendation for a great chapter to start with, drop it in the chat and
I always like to start with the American Revolution, the colonies' currencies.
yeah, okay.
I think that is the most relevant for us.
Okay, great. And thank you all. This has been terrific. I really appreciate it.
All right, Brian. Wonderful. Yeah, good to have you here. So we have GP Ama. GPAMA.
Yes, hi, it's M from Green Party Albuquerque metropolitan area. And
Hi.
my question is about public banks. Just like in New Mexico, every legislative session for the last, I don't know how many, several sessions, there's always a bill about creating a public bank. I don't know that it's ever gotten out of its first or second committee.
Yeah, it's
But
hard to get through the politics of the current politics.
but what I'm wanting in terms of creating or promoting these public banking campaigns is, can we talk about, like, say, I'll give easy numbers. I mean, the state of New Mexico only has 2.1 million people in the entire state. So let's just say you have an adult population of 1 million people. What is the, like, how many millions of dollars do you need to start a public bank that could realistically, we're also one of the poorest states in the country, could realistically offer loans to, you know, the 50 or 60% of the families that have trouble going from paycheck to paycheck?
It's true.
Or is that the way you want to do it? Because then you're creating debt, more debt for those families. But if it's a public bank, like, what's the benefit of the public banks, and just how much would you need to start? And I ask that because a lot of years there's a big announcement of, oh, we have X $100 million in surplus funds for this coming budget year or something like that. So if someone could toss some numbers my way, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think that's a good question for Joe Bongiovanni, who did some research and comparing what a public bank would do compared to what monetary reform would do, which is rather interesting. And of course, they are quite different in terms of, you know, a public bank would be more of a state operation, whereas the national currency is the federal. But there was a considerable difference, and I believe he has some numbers. Is that right, Joe? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm not seeing my. Okay, now I do. Okay, now sorry. Well, I really think it's really great that you know, the conversation is about a green candidate for governor who is running on a monetary reform platform, and governor of the state would be the guiding light to the creation of money under the NEED Act. That is to say, you know, the NEED Act, that being the model for monetary reform that we have, espouses, not only espouses, but it lawfully requires that the creation of money by the government will be 25% in grants to the states and municipalities on a per capita basis. So that would be the determining amount. Now, I can't really swear to it, but I know that the population, by population percentage, I you know, this is just me recalling, I thought it was $9 billion a year or something like that, that would be on the population basis, and the standard growth in the money supply, or by some other count, but dealing with this increase in the money supply being created by the government, that 25% of that power would go to the states. And so, to me, that has to be the focus, and not a state bank, where the problem with the state banking model, I'm going to say it out loud, is that they're proposing to do fractional reserve banking, which is debt basing the money. So yeah, that is the right question, but that is the problem. Why would we want to take the power away from the banks and then give it to the public? I mean, to me, that's a real question that's hard to answer.
Well, of course, we're not taking it away from the banks. We would be competing with the banks.
The banks, I'm talking about just in terms of the creating the money, into new money into circulation. That that part of it, we would be replacing the banks. When the banks could put credit into circulation, it's not going to change the money supply. So because they would still have the power to lend. So I think that those are the things that you have to compare. Yeah, there would be benefits to public banks, and if they weren't proposing fractional reserve banking, public banks would be a good conjunction with the situations that I just described. Having more and more public banks would be fine, actually. But the concept of going to fractional reserve banking, to me, it's like that's the what is it? The monetary aristocracy, the tool of the monetary aristocracy, or whatever this.
Yeah, which is usury, the serpent's bite.
So, but anyway, I think that I don't have. I'm going to look it up in a little while. I can find the spreadsheet, but that we did. But yeah, definitely the amount. I don't want to call it free money because it's money. You know, the states gave up their right to create and issue money. You know, which they were the colonies and they had the power to create and issue money. So they gave that right up to the government. And what did the government do with it? Did they do well by the states? As far as I'm concerned, they did not do well by the states. So we have a situation where the Need Act is given back to the states for the power that they had.
Yeah, I remember those numbers, and it'd be great if we could post a link to that article or something like that. It was in our newsletter, so it's in our archives, I think, somewhere. And that showed the difference in the amount of money that would come to a city, say, for instance, Houston.
Yeah, I guess what I want to say, last thing, because it really was like the door closer for me. When you take a look at the amount of money that's available in the public purse, okay, from the Need Act, and then you compare that with the amount of loans that would have to be made by the public banks to ever be producing even that kind of income, let alone profit, that there wouldn't be the ability to make that much loans in most jurisdictions. So it doesn't work. Fractional reserve banking or not, it doesn't work. Over.
Just a footnote on public banking. There's a public banking system in Germany that does mortgage lending at interest rates of about 1 to 1.5%. So imagine if we had something like that in our states, what a difference that would make for consumer income.
Yeah.
Yeah, the German model is really very good for regard to public finance.
That would be nice. All right, we have Peter Myers with a question.
Yes, well, I'd like to touch the topic, who owns the Fed, and I've got two web pages from the Federal Reserve's own website. And one says, who owns the Federal Reserve? And it says, the Federal Reserve is not owned by anyone.
Yeah.
And then there's another website. Then there's another website where it says Section 7, Division of Earnings, dividends and surplus funds, and it says, after all necessary expenses of a Federal Reserve Bank have been paid or provided for, the stockholders of the bank shall be entitled to receive an annual dividend. Now, that is evidence of private ownership. The payment of dividends is evidence of private ownership, so it shows that the Fed lies when it says that no one owns the Fed. I think that. Pardon? I'm going to put this material up before you, if I can. I'll just click on. Now, can I put? No, I have an image that I'd like to share with you in some way. I'm not sure how to do it.
I think Philena would have to give you the sharing, I think, or somebody.
Can
There's a
I
green
do
sharing
that?
button at the bottom.
Can I share a document or something or other like that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had it paused. I didn't stop it.
How do I do it?
Green button in the middle.
I press the share button.
Yeah, and then you select the file you're sharing.
Okay.
It has to be open.
Select the screen. Let's see. Documents. Now, I just want a document in my, I'll try my note. No. I'm sorry, I can't. Advanced documents. I've just got a document on my desktop, which I want to share with you. I can't find how to do it.
Yeah, they did an update because
How can I share something from my desktop? I can share it from Dropbox or
just be able to right click on it, I think, and then take screenshot.
Just okay. Well, right, control click on it. Okay, yeah. I have a screenshot here.
You should have a green share square at the bottom of your screen in the banner, and that should enable you to do that.
Well, it says I can share a screen, I can share a document, and it when I click on document, it takes me to, it gives me the choice of Google Drive, or I just want something for my own computer here.
You share your screen, and then it gives you the option to pick your desktop altogether or just a particular window.
Oh, okay. All right. Content only.
I know this is new sharing features, I guess.
Application windows.
I know they made it extremely more complicated with all these functions now, but
okay. Sorry about this.
well, we can move on to Nick is next.
Well, I'll have to. Anyway, do you think that the question of dividends being paid is something that should be made into a matter of public debate? I mean, if the Fed is paying dividends, it can't just be publicly owned. And the question is then, who's getting those dividends? I think that you ought to make that a topic of public debate and information.
Peter, just a quick comment, and hello to you. You and I have been communicating a little bit on the internet, and it's nice to see you. The federal monetary policy is made by the Federal Bank of New York, and the Federal Bank of New York is literally owned by the New York Wall Street banks. So the Federal Reserve superstructure is created by congressional legislation with a board appointed by the president. But the real decision making is done with the open market operations done out of the window at the New York Fed. That's all done by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which is literally owned by the corporate banks of Wall Street.
Yes, but do you actually have numbers? You see, I think that the public should know who the Fed has paid dividends to over the last 10 years, for example, and the amount of those dividends. Why?
I agree.
If it's a public,
totally agree.
And that you should be pushing for that, because if you know who's been getting the dividends and how much, that's telling you who's running the United States.
Yeah, well, Yeah,
Peter,
I kind of
Peter,
know that.
Yeah, but
Peter,
it
this
should
Use
be
the
is
on
power
public.
over public policy to change it.
Peter. This is Sue Peters. Hi. I had a friend a number of years ago who had a friend at the New York Fed, and he obtained in the year for 2006, he obtained the New York Fed Capital Stock Report, which is all of the 121, at the time, all of the 121 commercial banks that had shares in the New York Fed, the most powerful bank in the world. And he said, would you like a copy? I said, sure. So he sent me a copy. In 2006, 50% of the shares were owned by Chase. 23% of the shares were owned by Citibank. And the remaining 27% were distributed between the other 119 banks. So you figure out who's getting the dividends and who has the power over the world monetary decisions.
Well, the Fed has a web page called Who Owns the Federal Reserve? And it says the Federal Reserve System is not owned by anyone. I think they shouldn't be allowed to say that. When they're paying dividends, they should not, that should be considered a lie.
Well, I tried to get an updated report several times from the Fed. They ignore me. I guess I don't have the clout my friends did.
Right, me neither. I've told them.
Definitely.
Okay, I think next was Nick.
Thank you, mahalo. And good afternoon to everybody. I can imagine the people on the East Coast maybe have fallen asleep. I want to
right about that.
I want to thank Howard, Sue, Rita, Joe. If I left somebody, I know I left a few people out. The presentations were so informative, brilliantly done, and I appreciate that. This level of information, research, etc., and it all balanced out. Philena, I left you out, I guess. It all balanced out, each one doing a piece and a part. Richard, just for you in particular, are you aware that Andy Ellis is currently standing for governor as a Green in Maryland? He's done his campaign. So that would be great. I always would like to see campaigns where there's a primary, where there's 2 or 3 people. So just,
I think there is supposed to be a primary in Maryland next year.
No, well, no. If there's 2 Greens running, there's a primary. Maybe it depends how the state does it. You know, but I don't want to go off on a tangent. I just wanted, when you mentioned that, I would like to see you running in 49 other states. Okay. Then this is open for anyone who gave a presentation. What is the current status of the NEED Act from 2012? I tried to really quickly see what I could find. It seems like nothing's moved on that. So that's another one. And then my last question, and some of you know, I've been a Green 35 years, so I've been listening to all the presentations, people standing for office, people are definitely going to win their races, etc. Currently, we don't have a single Green in a state legislature. We don't have a single Green governor. We don't have a single congressman or congressperson, or senator. So when I hear the discussions, and again, it's not a criticism on the information. And Howard, I've been watching you for the 35 years do these presentations. And this perspective, it really has allowed me to, has taught me a lot. So when people say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, when I hear these presentations, and we don't have a single, like I said, all these positions, besides talking to, and there's 30 people on this call, besides talking to each other in our belly buttons, without putting anyone on the spot, and if you don't want to respond, that would be fine too, just to think about it. how do we get, the media ignores us. And I'm in a state where we don't have as much challenges as other states do. We've been on the ballot for 34 years. We were the first state to ever have a Green elected in a partisan race, beating a Democrat incumbent and a Republican. So all of this information that was given is brilliant. And there are so many parts of this system that we live in, plus the worldwide system. How would each of you go about getting this information out on a gigantic level where millions are aware of this and people get as motivated and excited as some of us who listen to these presentations over the years do? It's not questioning the content of the presentations. It's that again, oh, we need a green to run, and if we have a green to run, it'll be great. And again, Richard, I'm not picking on you. Yes, if we had a green governor rather than Wes Moore, that would be great. So anyway, I'm going to stop it at that. And Justin, again, thank you so much for you guys putting this all together, the slideshows and the depth of scholarship and information. Mahalo nui loa from Maui.
Can I be the first to respond back to you with your question?
No, you may not. Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I remember the 2008 debacle, financial debacle. And then I remember very clearly, suddenly 2011, and Occupy spread across the whole country, the whole world. It was out there. It was Occupy Wall Street. They didn't understand the debt-based money system. They didn't understand that. They understood, though, that what was going on in their world with their friends and their families was coming from those banks. When this happens again, we have to be ready. We have to be ready with the truth about what gives the power to those banks. And that's what has to be changed. So I would say for the moment, why we're having this seminar is to get the truth out to as many people as possible, because when that next Occupy happens, we have to be ready. Thank you.
Plus, this movement is growing. It's at least from my perspective, and of course it is slow, but the organizations that are pushing monetary reform are growing.
Yes, I agree with that as well, because like I said, just like what I said with the press conference today, we have to put it in front of people right now. This is happening now. This is still happening. And we have to combine this with current events to get the message out as well. And we have to keep pushing our divestment campaigns of private banks, Chase and everything. We still have a problem with some candidates will open their campaign accounts with Chase and Bank of America. You know, they don't even know, they're like not supposed to be doing that. But
well, we need more people talking about it. That's for sure. Get it out there in the head.
Yeah, we got to keep people, just the common people, like, please divest.
I agree. And I think one of the things is to let go of some of the polarizing issues that people get into and focus on systemic issues of fixing the economy, basically, because that's the number one issue every year, every cycle, because it's for shit.
Howard, could I just follow up? And I don't want to hog it because I know there's other people want to talk. So I agree with you again. I listened to Philena. I listened to Sue. Your response was great. And then, like Philena said today with the press conference, and people are going to walk away from that press conference, dealing with Epstein and all that other bullshit and crap that we have from our current dictator in chief. So, Howard, you're right. We have to educate people. And I know you've been doing this for generations. And then I don't know for how much time we've got, because again, which is the most? Is it the environment or is it worldwide war, whatever? So anyway, thank you for the response. That's why I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot. I appreciate again the information. And how do we break through with the media? Because NBC, CBS, even Free Speech TV, are they going to cover this issue constantly, over and over again? Over.
Would be nice to get the alternative media to pick up on this. I've been trying to get some of the podcasts and shows and stuff to, especially the ones that have had, people on talking about gold as money. At least have a monetary reform talking on some of these.
Amen. Amen.
I think we got time for one more, and then we're going to have to wrap it up with bringing up, is it Daniel? Dan, for the next webinar. So we'll have one more question, and then Daniel will come up. Daniel Dicker.
Someone put in the chat about the update on the NEED Act. I just want to push that to people who might not have seen the chat, because it's hard to follow chat and listen.
It never made it out of the committee, so it's dead in the water, but it's sitting there. It's written. It's just needs sponsors to push it forward. And Tom Walk, did you have a question? Or
more of a statement, I think. Anyway, thank you all. Media is worse than ever, as far as I want to say it a lot of times. And then in sort of in response to Nick Hilananda, thank you so much for today I got another email saying that we have to beat fill in the blank. How many of those we got over the last 30 years, 40, however long you've been doing this? We can't do this because we got to beat. And so you get frustrated by it, but then, so don't worry, keep on going. People ignore you. They'll isolate you. But we need to keep working. I just want to, my statement that I raised my hand to say is, I don't know if I missed it. I think it's relevant. To repeat anyway, is that there are other alternatives to exchange relations, and that there are other economic models that our founding fathers have usurped. The real estate was taken from indigenous colonized people around the world have been forced into economic systems, and they're all alternatives to a more community relations and maybe less exchange. And I don't know how much of day-to-day relations have to be in the monetary and exchange relations. And there's a lot of community relations that have been overturned by force, all the way up through like allotments and forcing people to have different religions or separating families, so many different things. And I just want to acknowledge that, and that there are alternatives, and not all this has come by people unwillingly, and not of all this has come upon people willingly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. That's going to be the end of our presentation. It is almost 11 o'clock Eastern time, so we need to wrap it up and go over our next webinar with Daniel.
Hi, I'm here in St. Louis, and let's see, we're looking at November 5th. It's going to be a webinar. It's still shaping up, but it will be about toxins, specifically pesticides. We hope to have someone on talking about laws that many municipalities and homeowners associations have adopted that pretty much ban the use of pesticides. We hope to have someone to talk about these preemptive laws that would prevent, that are being passed in states. 2 states have already passed laws preventing municipalities or counties or cities in the state from passing stricter regulation of pesticides. Talk about the influence the pesticide industry, such as Bayer and others, have, which is obvious because they are the ones that have gotten these state legislatures to pass these preemptive laws, and others. So keep an eye on it. That's November 5th. That'll be happening.
All right, thank you.
Hey, listen, could I say a couple of brief things, Philena? Just to correct Digger, it's actually going to be November the 7th. Black and Green Wednesday will be on a Friday because that's the only time we could get the location for it. And so the other thing is I need to talk to Chris Mann and Philena when we're off after the program is ended. Okay, so I hope Chris is still on. I know Philena is. But thank you, everybody. It was a great program.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Quick procedural thing. Are you going to save the chat? I'm not sure how to do that and make sure that's preserved.
Probably.
It's easy. You can do it yourself too at those little 3 dots down there.
Where, Howard?
Or somewhere down there, there's a place where you can copy the chat for yourself.
It's also at the top, 3 dots to the far right. You click that and you save it.
Yeah, right. There it is. Thank you. Well, it's been great. I'm so glad so many came. Spread the word. Let's make this thing happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Forward, upward.
Yeah. All right. Well, yes, like I said,